Wyatt.
Thank you, Mayor Holliday. Members of the Urban Renewal Budget Committee, welcome. And we have the agenda for tonight's meeting. What I'd like to do, since the former chair of the Budget Committee is no longer on the committee, soon we'll elect a chair, but I want to go really quick through the agenda. First, we're going to convene the meeting, take roll call, and have introductions. And then I will turn this over to the mayor to call for nominations to elect a chairperson of the committee. And then we'll look at the minutes from the prior biennium's budget committee meeting for approval. And then, as required under local budget law, the city manager, who is also the executive director of the Urban Renewal District and also the budget officer for the Urban Renewal Commission, will present the budget message. And then we'll be allowed to deliberate over the budget and have a review. We also have this time in here for public comment. And then item number 7 on the agenda is some suggested language for approving the budget document. And I have an adjustment to that as well, and I'll talk about that after the message. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the mayor to ask for a roll call.
So who's staffing this? Katie?
Yeah, I could do a roll call, or we can go around the table and just introduce ourselves.
Let's just do that. Laura, you start.
Laura Zettner, Citizen Member, Budget Committee.
Derek Benville, Urban Renewal Commission.
Brian Shaw, City Commission, Urban Renewal Committee. Commission.
Carol Pauley, Oregon City Commission, Urban Renewal Commissioner.
You that's a me.
Tim Christopher, Urban Renewal Budget Committee. Dan Holliday, Mayor of Oregon City, Urban Renewal Commission, and I just want to say that Chris Geiger is not here tonight. Is that right? So, moving on. David?
I'm David Frazier, City Manager. I'm not on the Budget Committee.
Wyatt Parno, Finance Director.
Joanne McCall, Citizen Committee Member.
Rocky Smith, City Commission and Urban Renewal Commission. Sean Dassler, Budget Committee Member.
Renata Mandelberg, Urban Renewal Commission.
Want to get the direct? Bob Mahoney, Urban Renewal Budget Committee. Almost like 3 minutes.
Carter Streeter, Citizen Budget Committee.
Okay, so at this point, I would entertain nominations for the chair of the Budget Committee.
Nominate Dan Holliday.
I second.
Any further nominations? Hearing none, we can vote by acclamation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We don't need a secretary, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you will review and approve the minutes of the April 23rd Budget Committee meeting of 2013. Just so everybody knows, as long as you have reviewed the minutes, you do not need to abstain because you were not there. So at that point, has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes? Is there any discussion? And I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of last year's budget, or whatever, April 23rd, 2013.
There you go.
Second.
So, moved by Commissioner Benville, seconded by Ms. Streeter. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on, we'll receive the budget message from the budget officer, City Manager David Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Commission members. It's my pleasure to present to you the Oregon City Urban Renewal Budget for fiscal years 2015 through 2017. The budget is balanced and has been prepared in accordance with Oregon budget law. In Oregon, there is a requirement that the committee officially receive the budget message before deliberating on the document, but there will be opportunities to deliberate on the document when I conclude. You're also welcome to stop me at any time in the presentation and ask questions, or you can hold those until the end of the presentation and ask them then. Either one works fine.
Just as a reminder, if you've got a cell phone, please put it to silent.
Thank you. So just to let you know a little bit about what we're going to cover today, we've got the presentation broken up into different segments, and we're going to start because we do have commission members here that are new, and it's also a nice refresher, I think, for existing members to go over some of this. So these are the things we're going to go over, beginning with the area description, plan goals, the core values, the current biennium, what's proposed, and then I'm going to show you some before and after photos at the end of some of the successes you've had last year. So the urban renewal area is 845 acres. We have waterfront in that area on both the Clackamas and the Willamette Rivers. Most of the businesses in the downtown are along Main Street. The Clackamas Cove and Washington Street toward Home Depot to the north. Under law, the mechanism by which urban renewal finances and operates is through the issuance of debt. The authorized indebtedness for the district is $130 million, but the district currently only has $11.8 million outstanding. So the idea behind the district, and just to remind everybody, is to build all the projects that are in the district, and with the theory being that when you're done with those projects, the district will have been renewed. The renewal will be complete, and then we can close the district. So the faster we get those projects done, the quicker we can close the district, and then the taxing entities that are essentially not getting revenue from what's there now, and arguably things like a landfill don't generate a lot of tax revenue, so they're basically forfeiting the ability to gain taxes on that today so that something gets built there and they can invest and get that money back later. I've had the privilege of closing 2 urban renewal districts in other cities where I've worked because we were able to finish the districts, and it was a timing issue more than anything. I happened to be there when we got everything done, and was privileged to go around to the taxing entities like my friends at the school district with a check that was way larger than what they were expecting to get, and also for the other taxing districts. So eventually when this district closes, someone is going to have the opportunity to go around to those partners who are making those sacrifices today and show them the results of that investment, because they will be, all this district will eventually be back on the tax rolls and fully contributing to the service delivery that we provide to the rest of the community. So I just wanted to remind you kind of the mechanics of how that works. And it's really fun to go around and surprise people with large checks that they're not expecting. But you can't get there until you build everything that's required in the district. So the Downtown Urban Renewal Plan establishes 3 overall goals for the agency, and they're listed here. The plan coordinates with Metro's 24 Growth Concept Plan, and that plan encourages safe and stable neighborhoods for families, a healthy economy, protection of natural areas, and more. This proposed budget focuses our projects that are consistent with the overall plan goals. And then periodically we check in with the Urban Renewal Commission, and we ask them to review their values so that the projects that we're working on within the districts match up with one of these established goals. And this year it happened in March. The commission met and established its priorities for the next biennium. And at that meeting, the commission confirmed that these were their 6 core values. And you see them illustrated in this chart. Many of them are interrelated, as you can see. So in the current biennium, these are the programs that we are advancing to achieve the goals of the district. Approximately $300,000 in grants have been awarded to businesses in the district for storefront improvements. This has become a very successful program, creating a more attractive and business-friendly downtown. Another $75,000 was awarded through the Adaptive Reuse and Rehab program. 4 or 5 years ago, we only had the storefront program, and we found that not only was it very successful, but eventually you run out of storefronts to fix. And then we were finding that we were getting more and more requests from people to do rehab inside their businesses. And sometimes those rehab improvements were even more essential to the economic prosperity of the business they're in than the actual facade. So the commission expanded the program, and that is also now becoming very popular. Improvements were also completed at the train depot. Asbestos was removed, and old flooring, rebuilding of the walls, and additional tenant improvements have been requested at that site. Also, work on the McGoffin Boulevard improvement project is underway. The project includes transportation and pedestrian enhancements to the area between the 205 overpass and the Clackamas River Bridge. Urban renewal funding of $1 million is allocated, and the project is on target. Amounts not spent in the current biennium due to timing of ODOT's construction have been carried forward into the proposed budget. The Cove project also now we're working with two separate developers. Grand Cove LLC is developing the privately owned parcel located behind the shopping center, and Clackamas Cove LLC, the original developer, is developing the urban renewal on parcel. Earlier this month, the Urban Renewal Commission approved the disposition and development agreement as well as a soil excavation agreement. I signed those documents after the commission approved them, and they were then sent to the developers, and I believe the developers have signed them and returned them to us. So you can now say officially we have an inked deal for the Cove project. Different than a building permit issuance, but we're getting closer. And that's...
So did you say they've signed it?
Yes, they've signed it.
Oh, okay, good.
So I'm very pleased with that, and I thought the commissioners would probably be as well.
Shocked, actually.
Yeah. Well, there were a few emails in between the signatures, but we worked that out and moved forward, and I think they've made a wise choice. I think it's going to be a success there. As mentioned earlier, the proposed budget focuses on projects consistent with Urban Renewal Agency plan goals. The total Urban Renewal Agency budget is $7.9 million, which is an increase of $178,000 over the prior biennium. Assessed value increases are conservatively projected at 3.5% and 4% throughout the biennium. Property tax increment revenue is the major funding source for the agency. Other revenue includes anticipated, well, that's what we're going to correct here. The two houses that are in there, Wyatt's going to talk a little bit more about those, but the market has changed quite a bit since the 2011 data that is in my budget message. You might recall I talked about two houses in there that we might sell off. And the data now shows that we're actually making about $20,000 a year on these two properties. So we're going to change our recommendation on that because we have new data. But Wyatt will get into that in more detail when I finish. Projected spending for the biennium totals $6.2 million and is comprised of $1.6 million in materials and contracted services, $1.3 million on capital projects, and $3.3 million to make debt payments on borrowings that have funded agency operations. The budget focuses on a few major projects that will benefit the community and increase assessed value, and those are on this next slide. The Cove project, as you may recall, those commissioners that are not urban renewal commissioners but just budget commissioners, budget committee members, the deal on the Cove is that the public contribution on that is not only dirt and that they want to use from another site that's owned by the agency, but also land, and $750,000 of public money. And in exchange for that, the city gets the projects developed, and we get a built-out street and a roundabout on both sides of the street. Just so you know, your Urban Renewal Commission members were pretty engaged in making sure that the public got a fair deal for this. Because we were offered half street improvements and can we trim here and trim there, and we kept on it, and we eventually I think got a deal that's more fair to the public, but it's also fair I think to the developer because they are taking some risks there. But those are the things we're getting. The budget includes carryover funds for the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancement Project that I mentioned in the last slide. Also the downtown rehabilitation and storefront improvement grant programs will be continued with proposed budgets of $400,000 and $240,000 respectively. The Urban Renewal Commission and staff will continue to pursue development of the landfill site at the old Rossman landfill, which is one of the major projects inside the Urban Renewal Agency that we must complete before we can close the district. The budget also includes about $30,000 in matching funds for a metro planning grant to perform a parking analysis. It's been a while since we've done those, about 5 years, and believe it or not, things change and people want to have more information. So there's a grant out there for that we're going to compete for, and then $20,000 to conduct land surveys. And by the way, those surveys, especially on our urban renewal properties, are pretty important when it comes time to develop, especially for things like setbacks and utility services and all the rest. So we think that doing those will make the properties more attractive for development. So I'm sorry that Chris isn't here tonight, because one of the things he asked about in the regular budget committee meeting last week was what kind of growth had occurred in the district. So we did some research so we would be ready for Chris's question, and this graph shows the increment has been generated over the last 2 biennial periods, as well as the projection for the proposed biennium. The blue portion of the bars represents standard growth for existing properties at 6%. In the last 2 periods, there have been additional growth of 9% and 7% from new additional investment. This is represented by the orange bars that you see here. So also, we recently learned from the county assessor's office that in 2012 and 2014, there were valuation declines across the county trailing the recession. So when you consider that the valuations were trailing the recession were down, we feel pretty good about these numbers here.
So you think, I think that 2015, 2017 number is pretty conservative, I think.
That's how we budget anyway.
Yeah,
But
but-
yeah, I think when you see this slide 2 years from now, we're probably going to see a bump in 2015 and 17. And that's going to be a good thing.
I mean, considering that the Cove project is now about to be underway and other things, yeah.
Right. So I want to take a minute now and show you some of our successes from the current biennium. A number of significant public investments have been made to stimulate private development in the district. These include roadway enhancements, public infrastructure improvements, and upgrade to community amenities. And the first few slides are going to be about the storefront program. So this is a before, and this is after. This is back when we had angled parking. Remember when we had that? And
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
On the board.
angled one way. Yes, thank you.
It'd be confusing if it was angled 2 ways.
This is my favorite one because it is such a stark. You know, when I was new to Oregon City 5 years ago and took my first trip down the elevator, this is what I saw.
Right.
And I remember the architectural classes in City Manager 101 about long, uninterrupted roof planes and building surfaces. And I'm not a designer, but it didn't take me too long to see that we had a lot of room for improvement here.
Look how much bigger that looks
Oh yeah, it's just,
on the right.
and it was such a prominent location too that any way you went through town, there was no way to not see it. And so it's just really dramatic. Here's another one that's also pretty nice.
You know what's funny is I was up on, it was like a month or 2 ago, I was outside of the building before a meeting and walked over to that lookout and looked down and I saw that building and I was trying to figure out what it was because I didn't recognize it. Yeah, the Masonic building.
There's another one.
Oh, that's the backside.
Yes, that's Railroad Avenue. And we're going to start some of these alleyway projects. You can't really see it, but right over here there's an alley. We're going to start doing some of those alleyway improvements too to try to activate those spaces.
That's the alleyway between Pioneer Pub and that building.
We now have also a new sign code, which could be helpful in not repeating this over here. So that's
Well,
good.
and that's probably the last mural you'll see in Oregon City.
Yeah, there's the last one.
Here's another one that's really dramatic. I mean, most of us drive on this road frequently, so this thing happened gradually, but all of a sudden it looks so much different down there. And this is really a good project because it's funded, even though we have a lot of urban renewal money in it, ODOT is the big funder of this project. So it's a fairly short presentation this evening. The proposed budget again is balanced and consistent with the prior period on most respects. We'll continue to focus on high priority projects and programs directed by the Urban Renewal Commission and our efforts to develop major projects like the Cove and landfill to accelerate our revitalization of Oregon City and the eventual closure of the district. So those two big projects to me are really the thing that's preventing us from accelerating our efforts because they generate a lot of increment, but they also make a huge impact as far as mitigating blight. And, so I just can't say enough about my enthusiasm to try to get those done. But we are close on the Cove, and I'm looking forward to seeing some.
I anticipate some action on Rossman 2 soon.
So, with that, I'll take questions if you have them. If not, we can go into the budget review, and Mr. Ricardo can remind you where we're at on the agenda.
So are there any questions?
I do have a
Renata?
question about the Gotham Boulevard project. I was on a transportation committee that was working with Metro to design them.
Yeah.
So it's been very impressive to see it actually
Yeah.
how much nicer it looks. As we start talking about developing the new parent site, is there an interest and a commitment to extending that beautification from, I believe it's 10 to 15 on?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's going to be an awful lot of eyes on the other parts of the project, and it's just like painting half your house. the other half's going to look pretty obvious that it needs something. And yes, there's another phase to the project, and I think the timing is actually helping us because we probably would prefer to know more about what's going to happen at Blue Heron before we do that last phase, because it could dictate some changes even in pedestrian ways and other things that the commission has talked about from a safety perspective. So, good question.
Bob?
David, on that parking study that, is it Metro that's going to engage in? Is that going to take into consideration the impact that the Blue Heron?
Yes, that's what's triggering it, actually.
Oh, okay. Because that is just going to turn Oregon City
Yeah.
180. You know,
Yeah.
it really is. And there's going to be a lot of impact up on the bluff, not so much downtown.
Well, I think given the discussions we've had with various folks, that the majority of the parking for the Willamette Falls Legacy project is going to happen on the site in some form or function. So we don't anticipate that project is going to create a ton of parking impact on the second level.
But the study does include the bluff.
It does.
It does include that area, just to make sure we didn't leave any stone unturned when we talked about parking down there.
Anybody else? Barb?
Can you go to the first slide that had the map of the district, please?
Yeah.
There is a little rectangular shaped bump out. It kind of ends right over the second O of Oregon City. It's not what I think of as downtown. Does it come up the hill, up 7th Street?
Yeah, I got my pointer right here. This is
Yes.
7th.
So that's
Yeah.
past Singer.
Okay. And
Right.
so how far
It
does it go?
stops at Washington, doesn't it?
No.
No,
It goes
All
up
the-
to, yeah.
all the
So
Eastham
Eastham.
School.
Eastham School, right at the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Basically, that was included to deal partly with the 7th Street corridor project and the art and the other stuff that went on in the corridor there.
And I have a question about the bar graph one. You show the additional investment.
You guys should stop me when
If you had a
Right
tablet,
there,
touch
right there.
it's a pretty short.
Okay, so in the additional investment, tell me all what that includes. That includes like the ODOT money, that includes private investment, public investment. Tell me a little bit about
Yeah,
it.
that's a great question, Commissioner Polly. So it's a little bit different look at the district here, what we're talking about. It's really the assessor's analysis of the value of the property in the area. So the way the assessor has tons of records on a lot of that stuff, but this is when we talk about investments that we put in, like the ODOT money and things like that. Private, publicly owned facilities like a new street, as you know, isn't on the tax rolls. The difference between the blue bar and the orange bar here is simply a private property that's on the tax rolls. And so, as David had mentioned earlier, we have the blue bar is the standard over a biennium 6% growth under the Oregon Constitution. And so orange is additional assessed value in the area over the standard growth.
So it's property values.
It's property
Yes,
values.
this doesn't include any of our grant revenues or
Okay.
things like that that are coming. This is only property tax.
Right.
And
And
this
those
is
property
the-
values have increased because of the.
Yes, they have, by that amount.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I guess I'd like to hear from Eric, his sense of demand for the storefront versus the rehabilitation grant program. I'm noticing there's more money in the rehabilitation. Is it that there's a shift now, we've finished, we painted most or
Well,
improved most of the facades?
historically, there's been more money in the rehabilitation because it takes more to have a good project with the interior. So there's usually more involved, and we want to stay away from just modifications to HVAC or electrical, that sort of thing. We want a substantial project, so we're offering more, which requires them to bring more of a match to the table. But there is slightly more demand for storefront projects because they're easier projects and they're a little less expensive, but they make a big impact. And people see that, and so they get inspired by other projects, and they want to. There's that increases the demand.
So, just an aside to your question. Last Saturday, I attended the soft opening of the Archbridge Tap House, and that is an example of one of the adaptive reuse grants. And so it's my neighbor Gene and his partner who've opened the place, but they're just one tenant of I think three that are going to be in there. And is the investment place, is that tenant one, the one that's off of Main Street?
On Main Street, no, they're not. They're
Oh,
not
okay.
part of that.
So it's not only the adaptive reuse, but we're bringing in new businesses with cool new spaces, and it's a really fun little place to go in and see, and minus the issue with the windows, which has been resolved or will soon be resolved, then it's going to be it's a really nice place to pop in. So just wanted to say that. Laura.
So there is debt service listed at 1.6 million. I'm just curious, what's the life of the debt and what's the interest rate on the debt?
That's a great question. Committee member Zettner, I'm gonna get you. So we've got on the books, off the top of my head, I don't have the numbers, but we've got three debts on the books, and a lot of it's due to refinancing. So we refinanced and got better rates. The range is between, and I think we can look at the financial report and get the exact number, but I want to say we're maybe 4% in that range. We've got a line of credit that we did and 2 other debts. So it's a range. I think we can get that number within the next 10 minutes. Fair enough.
And you have looked at refinancing to make sure.
Yeah, we're pretty low, and a couple of them have make whole clauses, so we couldn't necessarily refinance them and make a better deal. But we have looked at that. Yeah, it's a great question.
And then I have one more question. I noticed there's a reserve of the 1.1 million. Is that a bond covenant reserve, or is it just something that you have set aside?
You're correct. It's a bond covenant reserve for those particular
When
debts.
you guys want to start speaking English.
And I will. I almost anticipated that. Mayor always keeps me from getting too accounting geeky. So as David had mentioned earlier, the way an urban renewal operates is by issuing debt to make something happen, and then you repay it with the increment, right? So we've issued the debt, and banks want some guarantees. So a lot of times, as a covenant, as Laura said, is the bank will say, well, just make sure you set aside enough money so that you can make 1 year's annual debt service payments should anything go wrong. So we're required under contract, so we're legally obligated to hold that $1.14 million set aside to meet the requirements of our agreements with the banks.
Okay, thank you.
Brian?
Did we borrowed some money from another department within the city? Was that for the Cove project, or it was one of our projects years ago and stuff? I didn't know if that's still in
Still
here.
outstanding, yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Shaw. So that is still, so that's one of the 3 debts that we talked about. Oregon City, the city, lent the Urban Renewal District money to complete the restoration of this city hall.
Oh, okay. So,
And last year, before you were on the commission, we went to the commission and extended that debt for an additional 5-year period, which benefits the Urban Renewal District because they don't have to pay it back and pay higher interest rates. And they're able to meet their bond covenants. And it benefits the city because we're earning more on that loan than we are on our current investments.
okay.
It's about $1.34 million, that one.
Right.
Anybody else?
I figured we do a budget review before we ask questions about it, but while we're at it. Just trying to understand what the 50,000 is for other materials and services. What is that for? Do you have budgeted?
Tell you what, why don't we stop right there and let Mr. Parno do his budget review, and then we can ask specific questions about the budget.
And we are contemplating this as the budget review. We have the one correction we want to make regarding the houses, and then our part is done.
You won't have to re-ask your questions.
But you won't have to ask your question. Yeah.
That would be great.
Thank you, and then we'll jump right into that, the answer to that. So, thank you. So, really quickly, David had mentioned that there's a change to the proposed budget, and I handed out the new sheet, which has, highlighted in yellow are the changes. Okay? So I want to talk about that really quick. David explained, what happened is, we're putting together the budget, and we go through and we're reviewing, and all this is coming, and we're doing a lot of great work. We were talking this week about what had happened with these two houses that the Urban Renewal Commission owns, and Eric Underwood, our economic development manager, had done an assessment back in 2011 and came to the commission and kind of showed us that we weren't making money on these houses. In fact, we were unable to rent them. This was kind of coming, if you remember, this was after the recession, but we're still having trouble renting those things. And then we were having to do repairs. And at that time, we were netting about $1,200 at the end of the year, and that was a headache to manage and that kind of thing. So that Urban Renewal Commission meetings, I believe, said to Eric, hey, look into, let's sell those. And we included that in last period's budget. In the current proposed budget, we carried over the option to make the sale. And then David asked some pretty poignant questions. He said, well, have we reanalyzed whether we're making money on those houses or not? And Public Works Director John said, those are right by the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. So what I want to report to you is we've changed the budget. Certainly the Urban Renewal Commission can make a decision at a later time to sell, and there's no worries with the budget on that. However, at this time, those properties are netting at the end about $20,000 a year.
A piece or
together? Together. And in addition to that, those properties are located right by the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. So we know now that there's some big things on the horizon. And I think if you own those homes, this is the way David said, if you own those homes, probably wouldn't be a good time to sell. We're making revenue now, and we expect them to appreciate. So the change to the budget document is, you'll see in the previous we had a $300,000 sale of property resource. That's gone away. And because there's that much less revenue that we'd expect, the one-time cash inflow, contingency's been reduced at the end. So I'll answer any questions on that if you'd like, but I'd like to point out on the agenda, thank you, on the agenda that I just handed out, because we reduced, I want to say it in real simple terms, instead of selling the house and bringing in $300,000, we're keeping the house, letting it appreciate. That just means we have $300,000 less to spend. So the budget amount has been reduced by $300,000, give or take the rental income.
So who is managing the two properties?
It's a property management firm that Eric hired to take it off of his, and it's really inexpensive. It's like $85 a month or something like that. We were looking at that. So
$80 a month.
$80 a month. So yeah. So I think it's not too much of a burden to manage it and hold on to it.
And I assume that's because they're single-family houses and you have stable renters and all of those sorts of things.
At this time, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So there was a time period that we stopped renting it, right? So when did we start?
Well, we couldn't
rent
rent. We couldn't rent it.
We couldn't find
a renter.
We couldn't
During the
tenant
peak of
in
the
there.
recession, we weren't able to find renters.
And then we would have a couple
Yeah,
of
but I thought we
instances.
actually made that decision to not rent it.
That was before me.
Okay. So I think that, I don't have an argument with it. I mean, there was a lot of pressure on the city to get rid of those houses at one point in time.
From a particular person.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. I would say a lot of people, because of a lot of different things. But I think right now it definitely doesn't make sense to do that because of the Willamette Falls project and everything we've already talked about. So I think that's good. But
Thank you, Commissioner.
I have a question for Mr. Parnell. Since the houses are owned by the city, but they're being leased, are they on the tax rolls or not?
The houses are owned by the Urban Renewal District, and which is kind of like similar to the city. And because we are leasing them and earning income, we're required to pay property taxes. So if it was for a nonprofit purpose, a city purpose, no. Are they on the tax rolls? Eric says no, and he's the expert, so we can confirm that. But
another way of asking the question is, are they generating tax increment?
yeah, I don't have the answer to that, but I can look at that and follow up with you on that.
Are they in, oh, they are in the urban renewal district, right? Okay. So I have a question. How are they how are we paying taxes if they aren't on the tax rolls?
Well, that's the answer to the question. I'm sorry. So this is why he's the mayor. So so if you think about the assessor, they're collecting the money. They say this isn't for a city purpose. You're actually making income off of this. So we're paying property taxes. Those property taxes then are going into the tax rolls, which are paid into the urban renewal. It's a little bit more complicated formula than that. But to answer your question, thank you, Mayor. Those are on the tax rolls.
There's a line item.
Just a more complicated
I
way
believe
of being on the tax rolls, yeah.
There's a line item in the budget for property taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And for me, one of the seminal questions when I pushed back a little bit and said, let's dig deeper into the value of these houses, there was the timing issue and what would I do with my own money, but also looking at it and saying, well, the revenue from rents, even after repairs right now, considerably exceeds the taxable value of these. And I just wouldn't sell them right now when Willamette Falls is, we know there's going to be changes in that marketplace down there, and that's a good thing. That's what we're working for.
Which is why they were purchased in the first place.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe we'll want to do a sky tram.
Yeah, well.
Or parking or.
I'm glad someone knows what I'm talking about.
I'm thinking across all districts, it would be about $6,000 in taxes for the both houses.
But leaving
We're earning
your Oregon
20.
City Urban Renewal Commission hat on,
Yeah.
is it good for the district as an asset? And
As long as it's
the
making
answer
money.
is absolutely it is. So we're fiduciaries for the district, and that's why.
It's making money both ways, it's adding incremental. it's
Absolutely,
adding-
we're not, it's a, yeah, you don't see those kind of win-wins very often.
Well, and it's having property carved out too for other choices that may come before us,
That's
because we
right.
don't know what's gonna happen, so.
That's right.
It's good to have those
Did you
options.
make a zip line comment?
No, David
was a
made the
tram.
zip line comment.
The tram.
It was an aerial tram was the original
It's a cheap
theory
version of a
behind
tram.
it.
It's a simplified.
So, Mr. Parno, why don't we get back to Mr. Bendel's question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. And I have, Maria, I think is still researching what makes up that library. She's got it right here. Other materials and services. Okay, so we have 25,000 a year. That's all of the supplies, legal ads, including like budget notifications for this. Those can get kind of expensive. We've got annual memberships, which I'm not sure what that is. Maybe you can help me with that. And then ethics.
The Ethics Commission.
Oh, the ethics. So we have some required payments from the urban renewal into agencies to the state. I know the advertisement for this is like $1,000 to get it in the newspaper just for this budget hearing.
Annual memberships of Agency of Oregon Redevelopment Agencies, it's best practices for urban renewal.
Redevelopment Agency of Oregon membership.
Do you belong to BOMA?
AORA.
Okay.
I was just noticing that like the biennial for the last budget was 25,000, maybe it was just for 1 year's worth or something. I was just trying to figure out.
Yeah, we're
How it
switching, we're
doubled up.
going from a 1 year to a 2 year budget cycle, right, Wyatt?
Yes, we are. And I think Committee Member Vanville makes a good point because you're right. We've got the biennial, but last year we've ramped it up to 50 from 25 for the biennial. Do you remember why we?
It's been about 28.
Okay. So part of that can be when we put together the biennial budget, in advance, back at that time. One of the things we're not showing here, which is funny because Committee Member Datcher said that might be kind of interesting. So we'll look into it. But as we're looking through and projecting the amounts for the next budget, we're looking at what has actually happened. So in this case, we spent more than $25,000 in the last biennium. Eventually that'll show up in the actuals column, but we're budgeting more because that's actually what's happening.
Okay.
Thank you. And then I have a follow-up to Laura's question about the debt as well. Thank you, Mariah. So, Laura, the debt schedule carries out to the year 2023 with a final balloon payment of about $8 million. And as I said earlier, we've got the 1, 2, 3 debt issues, one of them being the loan from the city to the urban renewal, and then the others that we talked about where there was a refinance of some of the Hilltop expenditures that we did. No, I'm not saying that right. A refinance of the original Bank of America loan that we did, and that just closed down because when we took out that loan, it was about to expire, and then we went to U.S. Bank and said, hey, can you do something with this? And we renewed that. The rates are only Laura and I can appreciate this, so bear with us, everybody, and of course Joanne. But we have about $8 million outstanding at 4.95. That's one that has a make whole call, so we can't refi that one. We've got 1.1 million, which is the city's portion, and that's at 3%, 3.05. And then we've got 1.9 million at 4.5%. And that one is taxable because, yeah, we had a tax exempt and a taxable portion related to the projects that were income making or not when we split up the US Bank loan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Renata?
I have a question on the downtown pedestrian alleyways. City Manager Frazier mentioned that that was planned, additional alleyways were planned this coming year, but there wasn't any funds budgeted for it.
Their city, I think that's City Public Works, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, the alleyway projects is
Yeah.
a city-funded project.
Timothy?
So this might be a silly question, but so we discussed other materials and services for the year or for the biennium is 50,000. What is the difference between that and the miscellaneous at 45,000?
Thank you for that question. I'll have Loretta kind of look into the detailed breakdown and get back to you in about 5 minutes.
It's to pay for Wyatt's car.
It's not to pay for my car. I was on my car. You know.
Charges?
Derek, you had something?
Well, I'm just trying to figure out how you determine the projected revenue that's coming in. You show that for the first year would be 4%, and it would actually go down by 3.5%. And I understand that you want to be conservative, but you start seeing graphs like this with a standard growth of 6%. And just trying to figure out how you kind of came up with that as your projected revenue.
Yeah, I know the answer to that one.
Yeah, you want it?
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Committee Member Benda. Actually, that's an excellent question. And so when we put this budget together, what we receive from the tax assessor's office each year, Laura, I know she gets this too, the assessor sends us their estimate of what we're going to receive. And in this case, the 4% was right in line with their estimate. If we put the budget together we put together the budget with a baseline saying, we sure hope that the Cove project takes off. We sure hope that the landfill project, something happens there. And if those things happen, like the mayor said, the increment will go up quite a bit. A lot of the assessment reproduction that we have now, those major projects would have an impact, but we budgeted not assuming those, and specifically because if we assume those projects and the additional increment from that and start spending that money, we're going to get into a little bit of a hurt on our covenants. So if those projects take off and we start to see that, say, in year 2, certainly if there's a need, we can make an adjustment to the budget.
How did it go down, though, the second year?
It's just based on historical trends that we had in from the assessor's portion, and we knew that some of the hits in these 2 bienniums that are shown up here, there was the last year there was a 2.7%, which we talked to the assessor's office and they said that was carryover from the recession, which seems a little late to me, but it's okay.
Yeah.
We had a really high year at 10 and then a 2.5, and then they came in and they said, well, we expect you to get 4%. What else the bank charge? We expect to get 4%, and then we said, well, if we went from 2.5 and now we're at 4, let's go 3.5 and be conservative on that.
Okay.
It's interesting because we saw a couple of anomalies in here, and again, we called the assessor's office, and it's something I want to look into a little bit more. But we saw a couple years that were really high, and so we were asking a lot of questions about what were those, 10%, and a couple years that were a little bit lower.
The really short answer is we have to take the assessor's estimate or less. We can't project more than the assessor because then we get into problems with our bondholders saying, are you being too ambitious in your budget? But as Wyatt mentioned, if we find that we suddenly have a lot more increment and a lot more revenue than he's way off and we have expenditures associated with it, we'll come back to the Urban Renewal Commission and ask for a budget amendment to bring those monies in and spend them if we need to. That's why there's an amendment process.
Yeah, and really fingers crossed,
right?
Yeah,
I mean, our
that's a good problem
expectation
to have. I hope we have that problem.
Our hope is that everything goes in line with the signing of the Cove agreement. That's great. That just happened 2 weeks ago, and so we're
And if we do it this way, we look way better to the bonding agencies and the bondholders if we, under promise and over deliver, and we come in with 20% more revenues in 2017 because of these other projects. That just gives us a much better reputation.
Much better credibility, that's a good
So
point.
there's a lot of actors in this scenario that aren't at this table.
Actors, what do you mean?
Yeah,
Like the
banks.
assessors. Oh, the banks.
Yeah, they're an actor. They're the ones that give you the money.
Well, yeah. Well, they don't give us the money; they lend us the money.
Yeah, well, they make the money available. The beauty of this process is the fact that you do have that, the ability to modify and come back to this. So that's where your win-win situation is.
I agree. And one more thing I wanted to say to the urban renewal commissioners, just keep it in the back of your mind too. And a lot of you are kind of experts on this stuff and know, it takes a little time for some of these valuations to show up on the rolls, just in terms of the assessments that are done, the changes. So just to kind of keep, as we're looking at what's going to happen, let's say the code develops, then the assessor takes a record of it. That happens, then it doesn't go on the rolls for another year. It might actually, just keep in mind, it might actually be another biennium until maybe some exciting things are going to happen, but we won't see the increment for a couple more years.
Any other questions? Carol?
On the line item of permits, it showed up on the 1350 amended budget, and then it's on the next budget as well. What are those for?
Yeah, there's some licenses that we're required to get. I want to say they're
Dredging?
dredging licenses
Oh, okay.
because of
Okay.
this.
Sludge fund.
So they're for the code.
Yeah, John Lewis reminded us that we have to get dredging permits for the cove, and we hadn't budgeted those in the prior years, but that had come up, and so we make those payments and budget them.
And you were going to answer the question about miscellaneous?
Yeah, it definitely was. Thank you, Tim. So in miscellaneous, we've got requests for proposals, we've got bank charges, we've got all the postage and printing in there. So if we do kind of a district mailing, that would go into there. The other one was more office supplies, the legal ads. This one is more, and bank charges are, the urban renewal has its own bank account, and so it pays for the cost of that.
Miscellaneous is more operational.
More operational. Yep. I forgot to explain to you. I want to. Murray is the
I'm
audit.
surprised
person.
at the
The audit. I bet that's a big piece of it.
I'm surprised with your zeal for consolidating funds that those two aren't together somehow.
I bet they will be in the next.
Happy to help.
Yeah.
It's one of those slush funds, that you just
We
don't
don't
really
use
know.
that word in budget committee meetings.
It's now called dredging.
Dredging, it's not slush funds anymore. it's dredging.
Yeah, dredging fund.
Everything's accounted for to the penny. I will say this. Thank you for the credit there. We definitely closed all the funds, and the commission, the Oregon City Commission, did a fantastic job on that. Phase 2 is to shore up the accounts, and that's going to happen effective July 1 for the cutoff of the
Is
year.
this what excites you?
You see, okay,
Look
sorry.
at the funds.
It's been a long time since I've seen somebody raise their eyebrows like that.
Budget accounts.
Yeah, over budget stuff.
What excites me?
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, so William, since you're the only public, do you have a comment?
No.
What?
Somebody be a digitalis.
No kidding. William.
I just wish that there was this much conversation at the city's budget meeting. I'm very impressed with the level of questions.
Yeah.
So much for no. Okay, so we've done the review, we've had public comments. I would entertain a motion to adopt the 2015-2017 urban renewal biennial budget.
I move to approve the 2015-2017 urban renewal biennial budget of $7,708,910.
And?
Second.
Nope, gotta finish that
And
sentence.
establish that the maximum amount of tax from the division of taxes shall be levied.
Thank you.
Second.
So, motion by Commissioner Benville, second by Commissioner Dackler. Is there any discussion? Katie, call the roll, please.
Sure. So, Laura Zentner, sorry.
Aye.
Barbara Streeter.
Aye.
Renata Mengelberg,
Aye.
Joanne McCall,
Aye.
Bob Mahoney,
Aye.
Sean Datchler,
Aye.
Timothy Christopher,
Aye.
Derek Benville,
Aye.
Commissioner Carol Pauley,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Brian Shaw,
Aye.
and Mayor Dan Holliday.
All right, motion carries. Is there anything
Can you
else?
get your 3 minutes?
Oh,
Oh, just pass
He's on the
it.
committee. He
Yeah.
can get as much as he
he's gonna
wants.
add them on to the next one, so.
Is there anything else for the good of the order? Hearing none, we're adjourned.
Thank
you.